Welcome, everyone, to quantumhealers.com. My name is Candace Craw-Goldman, and today I am so honored and excited to talk to Kerry K for the very first time. I've not chatted, not texted, not had any messaging with Kerry K. I wanted to know who this lady was. She's only recently come into my sphere of observation, which I know is always strange for us. We're like, I've been doing this work for so long. How come I haven't seen her? But we know how that sort of thing works. And I wanted to introduce Kerry K, who is an ascension guide and a pioneer of heart consciousness to the Quantum Healers community. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you. It's such an honor to be here with you.
Well, I'm just so excited too. And I've been watching just a few of your videos, and I stay so busy with all of my commitments. And I see all of the work that you've done. And part of me is like, gosh, I want to know more about, I want to see more, I want to know more. But I'm pulled in all these different directions, as I know so many of us are. So I was hoping today you would just kind of compactly tell us what your work is about, how you got started, your unique perspective, and then maybe we'll end with sort of what's going on the planet right now today here in the latter part of June 2020. And I will just let you go. Who are you, Kerry K?
To just be given the floor like that and go, baby, go. Wow. Thank you, Candace. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So, who am I is a question that we're all here to answer, isn't it? And it's obviously an ongoing journey. It's a journey of daily discovery. And if your life is not a journey of daily discovery, if your life is stale, if your life is boring, if you feel like you're not moving forward, then you need to be looking at something. Because truly we are, at the core of it, the most dynamic God beings that we could ever imagine. And if we saw just once, just a glimmer, a little sparkle of the truth of who we are, just that sparkle would forever change how we see ourselves. Because we tend to, if somebody were to ask you or the person listening, who are you? We tend to try and sum this up with titles and, oh, well, I'm a this or I'm a that, or this is my practice or whatever it might be. But truly, who are we on the inside? We are all God sparks. That should stop your world in its tracks. What do you mean I'm a God spark? Take that in for a moment so that each one of us can come into awe and wonder at the profound magnificence of what we are as human beings, each one of us. Whether we know it or not, whether we pursue it or not, each one of us has this enigmatic God spark within us that is infinite. So stop there and think, but wait a minute, if I'm an infinite being, I've only been, for me personally, I've only been Kerry K for 44 years. And 44 years in the lifespan of an infinite thing is not even a drop in the ocean. What is 44 years compared to infinity? And that's what really excites me, is what is that infinite self? What is that infinite substance that I am? So as a child, I was incredibly blessed, Candace, to have this mom who, unlike most of my friends, would have these amazing conversations with me. And we would eat an early dinner. This was how it was in my house. It was my mom, myself, and my brother, early dinner. And we would retreat to the lounge with drawn curtains and no lights on. My mom suffered from headaches, so the light would bug her. So we would sit in this beautiful, what felt to me like a cocoon. And these were some of the best conversations I have ever had in my life. And if you have someone in your life that you know very well, a husband, a brother, a best friend, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whatever it might be, do you know what kind of conversations you have when you sit unrushed, unhurried, in a darkened room with curtains drawn, and you just speak? You just speak about whatever's on your heart. So we had these beautiful conversations about spacecraft and UFOs and life on other planets and past lives, and these amazing seances that my mom had been to as a child that fascinated me endlessly, and healing and how it worked, and who was this being called God, and what was religion. And this was everyday evening time conversation. So I was being truly not given stories. I was not being given stories. I was, with my mom, an active participant in exploration. And that's what the best conversations to me are. They're in the dark. They're in the dark because that's symbolic of where we should be. We should be in the unknown. We should be totally, like, if you didn't know any better, and you were having this conversation, even the ones listening right now, if you closed your eyes and you didn't know any better, you could imagine that we're sitting in the holodeck of a spaceship and that we're cruising over the Milky Way and headed toward another galaxy. And there would be another level of conversation that could come about when you lose reference of where you are and who you're meant to be. And you're given this free rein to just speak. So these were my dinner time or post to dinner time conversations with my mom. And that's where the real depth of me became manifest. Because in that space, we did discover or discuss what exactly does it mean to be an infinite thing? Because the human brain can't wrap its head around how big a billion is. And if we can't wrap our head around how big a billion is, how can we begin to comprehend who we are? So I've learned in life to go to that place that is beyond the brain, beyond this that defines us with such limitation, that defines us with names and titles, and to go to the unknown, to meet myself in the unknown, and to meet another in the unknown. And then the other can truly come to know themselves in a way they haven't connected with themselves before. And together we can discover something new. So that's where I love to speak. That's where I love to meet you. That's where I love to meet people in that place that we've never been in before. So there should be no boredom in life. There should be no stale anything in life ever. And if there is, put yourself in a darkened room and find somebody who's willing to sit with you and have a conversation in the unknown, and be unknown and go discover. Go discover who you are. It's the most, honestly, being human is the most exhilarating exploration we could ever wish for. Ever. There is nothing like this. And the tragedy is we so often get bogged down with survival stuff. So survival stuff takes away our spark. You know, it takes away our will to explore. And it puts us into either future or past. When we're in survival, we move out of it, very often a desperate fear, we move into a frame of reference that puts us into a when, then, or a what if. And so we disengage with the now. Survival does that. It disengages us from the now. So if we could overcome survival, then we stand an amazing chance of connecting to the true self. And we do not need to be debt-free to release ourselves from survival. We do not need to be perfect. We do not need to be fifth dimensional. We do not need to be without fear. We do not need to pass an exam. We do not need anybody to give us permission. It's a choice. It's an inner choice. And the choice is, do you dare to go beyond the place that you currently know? And if the place that you currently know is perhaps survival, then you're really in for a treat. Because the now moment is gonna introduce you not just to a whole new self, but a whole new paradigm in which the self lives. Then we're truly broadening the frame of reference for who we are. You see, look at these conversations. Candace, you just said, "Hey, Kerry, who are you?" I mean, I could keep going. I just find life the most full experience.
I do as
It,
well. I do as
yeah.
well. And I can feel that in you. And that is why I was so excited about connecting with you and talking with you. I feel that most often in my work, but often for me, going outside. I go outside and I'm just, just in my own yard. And I'm constantly in tears with how magnificent everything is. And a lot of people who might see me do that might really wonder what's wrong with her, but I feel exactly that same way. It's just like, I just love life. I mean, it's got its hard moments. It doesn't mean that there aren't things, emotions that come up, anger or sadness or whatever. But so a couple of questions came to me. Well, first of all, when you were talking about your childhood, you're so lucky, so blessed. My parents, nothing like that, not even close, although they had some interesting stories but nothing like that at all. I wonder, was your mom blessed like that from her parents? And did your brother stay awake his whole life? Did that happen?
No, this is the craziness. My mom raised two children in the same house, and we were both in the same lounge having the same conversations. My brother was there. And it really confuses me some days because I look at him and I think, how did you land up so mainstream? Because he is. How did that happen? That everything about him it really did. It looked for and it clung to mainstream reasoning, mainstream opinion, and that's where he gravitated to from a very young age and stayed. And so that's where he is. And interestingly enough, so did my mom go there. How bizarre is that?
That is bizarre.
Yeah. Now my mom would sit in front of you, Candace, and she would tell you, even today, as mainstream as she is, about what your aura might look like, for example, or she's incredibly psychic, which is why we could have these conversations that we did. But something in her and my brother at the same time switched and went completely toward the safety and the sanctuary of the known, at which point my path went deeper into the unknown. And I just think my mom was fulfilling her part of the agreement with me. It was kind of like, I will walk you into that discovery of self to the point that you can continue by yourself and you don't need me anymore, and then I'm going to do what I need to do. And so it's a strange, anomalous thing, but that's how it's worked. I'm the only I was going to say black sheep, but I could also say the unicorn of the family. It's the same thing. Yeah.
So I didn't get to hear an entire interview, but I listened to a recent interview where you talked about that was your home world, and then you would go to school and you figured out, at a young age, which I did too, you figured out that was a system. You were stepping into a system when you went there. And that also is very, very unique. And I remember being completely bewildered by everything about the system. And I never lost that. I played the game, but I was always very aware of the system, and it sounds like you were too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I learned very quickly that there was a way to behave in the system, and there was there was an identity that could respond and relate to people in the system as if I lived there. And then there was who I consider to be the real me, which is kind of like me out of the box or out of the system. And then it was like, whew, I can be me now. I can come out. And you know how sad it is, because some people don't ever get that message. Yeah. They don't ever get the message that they can come out now. It's okay. No one's looking. You can take off the disguise. Some people wear the disguise of fitting in and belonging for so long that they forget to take it off. They think that that's who they are. So I was very, very well aware that there were two worlds, and the one was a system, and it was much like an act where you had to do certain things at school, get certain marks, say certain things, and none of it was real. None of it was real. It was completely meaningless to me. But it was kind of like, in my perception, it was kind of like being in jail. But I knew how long the jail sentence was, and when I was going to finish school was the day I was going to come out of jail. And so I just carried on day by day by day, counting them down until eventually I was released. and that's what the system was for me. The system was something I had to go through, but nowhere I wanted to be.
I noticed it really, really early on when I mean, even in kindergarten or in first grade, when I would realize that things like playground time was limited and art time
Mm,
was limited and singing time was limited, but the
mm,
other stuff was really emphasized. And I remember this you being released thing. For me, it was, I haven't thought of this in decades, Carrie. The last two steps off the school bus back to my house, my yard, you know, where I
mm,
was more
mm.
myself. And that system
Yeah,
just follows us, right? It follows us all the way
yeah,
through school and then employment.
yeah.
But you stayed aware of it, and then you had some amazing awakening experiences. Tell us about that. First off, tell us when that happened. Like, and I love it that you're 44, 44 and
Yeah.
144 following me around like crazy these days. When did that happen? How did that work?
Mm.
And how did that
I've
change?
had many. I've had many awakening experiences. The one that I think the video that you watched me on, I spoke about the Samadhi Experience.
Yes.
There's two that I'll share with you. The one, which I didn't share on that video, which was really my first major vision,
Oh, well,
happened when
tell
I
us
was
about that.
12.
Please tell us about that, since we've got another interview you can point to. Sure.
So I was 12 years old and walking to school, and this image is very much etched in my mind. I looked down at my suitcase, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience where suddenly your senses become so heightened. In my case, it was not just that my senses became heightened. I became aware that there was like a recorder, and this recorder was recording everything about the moment I was in. So it felt quite surreal. I remember looking down at my hand, and I remember looking at the school case that I was carrying. It was a brown handle. And I was studying the marks on this handle and the suitcase. And it was as if suddenly time was just expanded so that 10 seconds became 10 hours. And here I'm observing this tiny little thing, gosh, look at this handle of the suitcase. And I was so mesmerized by this funny little old thing in my hand that I hadn't noticed that all the clouds in all the sky had been drawn to one central point directly in front of me. Now, this wasn't the kind of vision where I can say to you, I felt this. This is the kind of vision where I could say, I saw this. I saw this with my eyes. So I saw all the clouds. It was like something was sucking all the clouds and all the sky into one area just above where I was. And at this point, I stopped because now I was mesmerized and I saw these clouds begin to take a shape. And here's the very funny story. When I was growing up, I was born to a Jewish mom and an Afrikaans Christian dad. And religion was always an open field in my house. It wasn't a case of you are Jewish or you are Christian. It was more a case of you can be what you want to be. But I was very plagued. I was extremely concerned about making the wrong choice. As an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old even, it was weighing so heavily on me. And the choice was, what if I make, or rather the dilemma was, what if I make the wrong choice? What if I choose to be Christian, but Jews are right, or I choose to be Jewish, but the Christians are right? I'm damned to hell if I make the wrong choice. I mean, I really felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I really did. And there I see in the sky this image of a cross, and I see Christ on the cross. And Candace, what does Kerry say? I look at this image in front of me, made out of cloud, and see Christ on the cross, and I go, oh, the Christians were right. There we go. Thank you. Got the answer. At that point, this being made out of cloud came off the cross and started walking toward me. And I now realized that I was really in a sacred experience. It felt as if the clouds were whirlwinding around me now. And as much as these clouds were whirlwinding around me, there was this stillness. And in this stillness, there was myself and this being called Christ who was now walking towards me. And his words were very few. His words were, you are neither Christian nor Jew. You are the same as me. And with that, all the clouds disappeared, the whirlwinding disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Time suddenly came back online again, and I was carrying on my journey walking to school. It took me years to understand the message. You are neither Christian nor Jew. You are the same as me. What did that even mean to a 12-year-old? My mom didn't know. I didn't know. I knew that at some point I would gain clarity, and I know that your listeners will probably get it. Your listeners have obviously walked a spiritual journey, but my 12-year-old self didn't yet know that the real message was that this being called Christ was telling me that we are all one. We are all the same. We are not categorized. We are not religions. We are beyond that. We are all Christed beings. And I knew, well, later on, I knew that that was an activation, that it had activated the Christ consciousness within me. And that was my first very, very important wake up in the world. So I was very spiritual, very awake, very aware, but this was a next level activation. Then, and I think this is perhaps the story that you heard me speaking about, was another very amazing experience where this was years later. I mean, the Samadhi experience was not even that many years ago. It could have been about 5 years ago, thereabouts. And in this experience, there was only oneness. Now, you might think that your mind can understand what that means, and most people will go, oh, okay, so there was oneness. It cannot be understood. It can only be experienced. Not even I would have understood. If you said, oh, Kerry, you're going into a field of oneness, I would have said, yippee yay, I've been there before. I probably would have been arrogant enough to say to you, oh, oneness, Candace, I've been there before. I know what oneness is. I want to tell you, I had no idea what that level of supreme consciousness felt like. And how the experience occurred for me was, I was in a very deep meditative state. And in my very deep meditative state, eyes were closed, and it was in a darkened room, which we now know is one of my favorite places to be. And in this darkened room, in my reckoning, some inconsiderate jerk had just walked into the room and put the lights on. It was all I could think, Candace, because suddenly I was going like this. I couldn't see. I was blinded by this intense bright light. So I opened my eyes to identify who this culprit was, but to my great surprise, the room was dark. And as I blinked my eyes closed again, there was this luminous light that was so bright it was blinding. Open my eyes and it's dark, close my eyes and it's bright. I realized then, okay, something's going on here. Later, I realized that my pineal gland had shot open. And that was what had facilitated what I call the Samadhi experience. And in that great awakening, which was essentially taking an awakened person to their next level, that's what it was. And their next level, in this case, happened to be so extraordinary that I couldn't have dreamed of such a place. So here I was in this bright luminescence, and I started, as you would imagine, blissing out. Except there was a voice that came to me in that spiritual bliss, and the voice said to me two words that I was quite shocked to hear. The two words were, go beyond. And I thought, why would I want to go beyond this? It's so beautiful. Oh, it was just what everybody dreams of as nirvana, as heaven, as ultimate spiritual bliss. And now somebody's telling me to move out of the bliss as if there's somewhere beyond this. That's unimaginable to me. But I went beyond. And I didn't go beyond once or twice even. There were numerous pushes to go beyond. And each time I was elevated into higher and higher and higher states of awareness until I was beyond creation, until there was no creation whatsoever, and I was completely aware of myself outside of creation. So I was looking at all of the universes. At first I was looking at Earth, and then the galaxies, and then the universe, and then all the universes, and then I was aware of myself totally outside of creation. And it was so interesting because creation was tiny, and what was so vast was we would call it the void, we would call it the infinite no thingness. That was expansive. But creation, almost from where I was, from that vantage point, was like a tiny bubble. But within that tiny bubble were an infinite number of universes within that tiny bubble. And where I was now in this Samadhi state, having listened to this voice tell me, go beyond, go beyond, go beyond, through all these levels and layers until eventually I was there, what I realized in that moment was myself as the God self. It was the self where there was no more separation to be had, because all the layers of creation are filters or layers of separation. So where we are here as the individuated human self, this is as separate as we can feel to source right now. And each dimensional point beyond where we are right now, we move closer into union, closer to connection, to source, which is why it feels more like home. And we start using words like bliss, and we start using words like oneness. But nonetheless, I found myself there as the creator of all that is. And how could humans have words? Because there are none. But what a human can have is presence. And what a human can have is the ability to embody that presence. And that's what I came back with. And I came back very gently through all the layers, back into the earth body. And as I was coming back into the earth body, there was so much going on. There was, are you sure you want to do this? Do you even want to get back into the body? I then remembered, wait a minute, I've got 3 children. Of course I want to get back into the body. I've also got a wonderful husband. I'm not prepared to leave them now. All of this occurred, went back into body. I realized, oh wow, I think I just ascended and came back again into the human form. And the recollections began to come back after, it took days and it took months for all the recollections to come back. But the thing that truly changed me was less what I learned and more what I felt, that which I would call that embodiment. So the first awakening was the Christ consciousness activation, and the second one was the God consciousness, also known as Samadhi, the state of being at one with all that is. So those 2 experiences absolutely changed my life. It changed how I speak to people, not necessarily the words that I use, but the energy behind the words. Sure. Words have to be very secondary. You know, if you ask me something, I can explain it in words, but words need to be the secondary conversation. The primary conversation is the energetic conversation. And that's what those experiences gave me, was a very firm foundation in those energetic conversations, a very firm realization of the self as an energetic being. Because you see, human beings, when it comes to being present, they'll use terminologies like this. They'll say, I want to be present. And I can say, well, that's good, because I want people to be present too. But when you're present, go beyond present until you are presence itself. And at that point, your words become laced with the presence of pure consciousness. And you and I could be talking about ice cream and hot chocolate sauce. We could be talking about, your beautiful yard and what it feels like when the sunshine hits your face and when you watch your flowers grow, and we would still be transfixed in the glorious moment. It becomes less about what we say and more about who we are whilst we say these words.
Such a beautiful, beautiful collection of stories you have. So there's a lot of people I know who haven't had these kinds of experiences, and they would like to. And we as teachers, we try to help them do that. And I know that you have courses and offerings to help them do that. And I'll definitely have you tell us about those a little bit towards the end. But when you're thinking about this idea of light, there's a lot of people who, my own clients and colleagues, they're talking about themselves and their clients seeing sparkles or flashes of light. And, you know, you've used the terminology, this brilliant, luminous light, and that we're sparks of God. When people are seeing sparkles and flashes of light, what do you make of that? How does that compare to some of the light experiences you've had?
Yeah. So when people see those sparkles, which by the way now are very present, and it doesn't actually take that much to see them. If anybody's sitting here going, oh, I haven't seen any sparkles of light, do yourself a favor and go outside. It's the easiest place to spot them. You can do it inside, but the easiest place is on a fairly bright day to go outside and to just look into the so-called nothingness. Look into the fresh air, because we don't. How crazy is that? We don't look at empty spaces. Our eyes are trained to look at solid objects. So we'll look at the trees, for example, outside, and we'll say, wow, look at the beautiful trees or the lawn or whatever it is. But train your eye to look into the empty spaces, and these little sparkles are there. Now, some people will say to you, oh, that's a medical condition. There's floaters in your eye, which is a buildup of proteins and collagen. And yes, that is a real thing. Those floaters in your eye, medically, is a real thing. But how do you know if what you're seeing are the sky sparkles or these so-called floaters? So it's very easy, actually. The floaters tend to have a darker hue. They tend not to be light. They tend to be a grayish color, and they'll move because they're on your eye. They'll move as your eye moves. So you look to the left, they move to the left, and the patterns never change, right? So it's very easy to spot them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're seeing particles of photonic light. Because the veil is so thin now that it's almost non-existent, we're able to see the actual building blocks of the hologram that we live in. And they are most easily spotted outdoors, but eventually you can train yourself to look at your hand, and it's such a fun exercise. And if you do it for long enough, your hand will disintegrate into those little moving photonic light. They look like individual beings, each one of them, and they actually are little individual packets of consciousness. So that's a result of us raising collective frequency. We're going to start seeing more and more things like this. We're going to start having more and more experiences like this. And I think it's really important to seek them out. Go look for them.
You have a marvelous way of both noticing and noting that words are insufficient and we have to go past that, and yet being able to use words to communicate that and everything. I have a question for you because it's something that I deal with all the time. I know my colleagues and my friends, we talk about this a lot. There's a lot of people who want to awaken more deeply, etc. And they kind of want to think their way there, or they want to follow a step-by-step method to get there. Yeah. And it's very difficult, I have found, I've tried many different approaches. I still am trying, I still do. How do you talk to people like that you can't think your way to this place? It's very, when we're trained to approach everything logically, linearly, and conceptually and concretely, how do you make those first steps?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. And I think everybody needs to take note of how they became so orientated toward analytical thinking, so orientated towards that linearity of thought, where everything needs to be a step-by-step process, almost as if they would say to you, okay, Candace, I've got my notebook in front of me. How do I become enlightened? Go. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And then they're going to go and implement all these steps. And of course, it doesn't work like that at all, which will really frustrate those who are in the linearity of life. So the first question that each person needs to really ask themselves is, how did I get like that? Because it is not natural. And how do we know that that's not natural? Well, we look at babies, we look at toddlers. There is nothing about them that is linear. They're totally experiential, and they're engrossed in the experiences of everything. They're engrossed in the experience of looking at the light bouncing off their fist or their hand as they move it in front of their face, and we go, oh, isn't that cute? We get very condescending, you see, because we've forgotten how to be experiential beings, and we've become so linear, and our association is that linearity equals intellectual superiority, which is the loss of wisdom. When that happens, when that kind of thinking happens, we've truly lost touch with the wisdom that we had as children. So there we are as children, engrossed in experience. That's the true nature of being human. We then went to this institution, which we spoke about in the beginning of the show, Candace, called school. And that was where we became systemized to think in a certain way. That's where it all began for most human beings on planet Earth. And we unfortunately received huge accolades. The more we could numb out and dumb out the experiential orientation of self and invite in its place the logical linear self, the more accolades we got, the more we were told, you're a good boy, you're a good girl, you're very special, you're very clever. So now that we were being finally acknowledged and validated and rewarded, we wanted more of the good stuff. And so, of course, we began to pursue the way of being, and it really did. It became a way of being that replaced the true self. When we can see that, then we can acknowledge, okay, so the linear thought is not the inherent truth of who I am. What, therefore, is the inherent truth of who I am? That's where we begin. That's where we've got to begin, is understanding that it's not natural to humanity. Then I think you and many of your listeners would have their own unique way to connect to their beingness. On my website, I've got a free, I call it a meditation, but to be more exact, it's a free deep relaxation. I wouldn't really call it a meditation. It is a very simple, deep relaxation. And I'm sure everybody's done it before. It's the sort of thing where you go, relax your feet, feel the relaxation raising up through your body. Blah, 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 blah. Many people will know this, but many people will forget to make that their natural state of being. So we actually have to practice to get back there. And when we are there, we need to reinforce, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to be me. At that stage, we begin to validate the experiential self again, that within us that can experience life rather than analyze life. And once we have gained connection to that experiential self, the self that experiences and therefore is present with life, then we can begin to carve a spiritual path that is really a satisfying journey that yields great results. Because I notice a lot of people are putting in a phenomenal amount of work with very, very, very little result. And I'm probably too impatient to have very slow results. I don't have the resolve to work diligently and keep practicing and keep doing the same thing without results. I want transformation, and I want it in such a way that I can honestly feel it, not hope it, not get a glimmer of it. I want it to knock me off my feet, and I want to have every fiber of my being engage with the experience of enlightenment. So that can happen when we figure out how to get out of the analytical linearity of the brain. It's available to everybody. And that, to me, is the purpose of a spiritual teacher. A spiritual teacher or a spiritual guide or a way show, whatever we want to call them, these, in my eyes, are the people who lead us to, I call it the 0 point self, which is the non-linear self, the non-analytical chatter of the brain. When we can get there, then we become, as the human being, as the experiencer, we then become our own teacher, we become our own guide. But the spiritual teacher is there to lead us into ourselves, to lead us out of the linear brain into the experiential self. And I think everybody should invest in connecting with that person, which will be a different person for everybody. It could be a book. It could be a best friend. It could be somebody who you conjure. I have people who conjure beings in their imagination. As far as I'm concerned, they're not conjuring beings in their imagination. That's a guide. But whatever works for them, is great. So long as we know that that's what we've got to do. We've got to seek not for somebody who's going to enlighten us, but for somebody who can bring us into ourselves, into the place that we need to connect with, so that we can walk our own journey of enlightenment, because we actually already know how to do that. It's just that it's not where human beings hang out, because it's not up there in the linearity of the brain. It's in a body space, it's in the heart space, it's in experiential consciousness.
So beautiful. What do you think the current situation on planet Earth does to facilitate any of that happening? I kind of feel like it's rather important. I wonder if you could just give us kind of an overview of what you see happening out there. One of the things that I'm thinking of is when you talk about the experiential, and relaxation. And I always know it when my shoulders come up into my ears, and I remind myself to take my shoulders out of my ears and just relax. Then I can do that during the day. But you can't do that unless you're breathing and breathing deeply. And look at what's on the news. I can't breathe, and things over our mouths. And I'm watching what's going on, and there's a part of me that is, like everybody, sort of amazed and mystified, and yet also deep in my heart, I know that this is helping. I feel like it's helping, and that it's gonna break free, kind of like your explosion of your pineal opening. What do you think about just kind of an overview of what's going on the planet?
In its simplest form, I would say to you, everything is crumbling. And it needs to, and it should, and we shouldn't hold on to it. It must. It's crumbling. And what is that's crumbling is the systems of the old, which will be inevitably the schooling system, the banking system, the political system, everything that kept us in the manipulated third-dimensional hologram. Every system that was designed to keep humanity enslaved is in the process of crumbling. But I think a lot of people knew this was going to happen. A lot of people knew that we were going to evolve. We were going to move from a third-dimensional to a fifth-dimensional perspective. But I think a lot of people imagined it was going to look very pretty. They imagined it was going to look like rainbows and fairies. They imagined they were going to be dancing with unicorns. And what do we have? We have the exact opposite. We have sheer, unadulterated chaos. And it's absolutely imperative that we allow ourselves to see the chaos, but realize that it's just the old crumbling. And it's not meant to be rebuilt upon. In other words, we're not meant to rebuild a new 3D over the old 3D. We're meant to let it collapse completely. So get out of its way. Get out of its way. And we could go in Candace, and we could say, well, there's a number of specifics that's happening. For example, people are learning about equality at the moment. People are learning about shame and blame at the moment. People are learning about taking their power back. Oh, that's a big one at the moment. People are learning how to not be misguided and misled and to think for themselves. And they're learning about the consequences that occur when they hand their power over to authorities external to themselves. So all of this is happening, but if we took a step back, which is what I really like to do, I like to get a picture and then go beyond and beyond and beyond until I've zoomed out enough that I can just see it in its simplest form. And in its simplest form, it's all crumbling. And it's our job to get out of the way so that the crumbling can happen. Because whilst all of this crumbles, that which once was crumbles, we then get the opportunity to attune ourselves to a world that already exists. We don't have to go and build a new earth. We don't have to go and build new structures that already exists. We have to attune ourselves to be able to see the new life, the new paradise that already exists, that needs us to visually connect with it so that we can make it real and anchor it into our reality and then start playing in that new field. At that point, Candace, then you and I will have a conversation, and part of the conversation will be like, hey, do you remember that crazy place we once lived, Kerry? Do you remember when everything went a bit chaotic? And we might even find it a bit difficult to remember because we'll be so anchored into the new that we'll go, yeah, that sounds familiar. Just tell me again what happened. So it's like, it'll be there, but it will be a distant memory. And it's not a time-related thing. It's going to be a distant memory because dimensionally or energetically, we will no longer relate to that which is in the process of crumbling. That's why it's going to seem vague and distant. And in its place, we're going to affirm the new reality. And we shouldn't even call it the new reality. It's an existing reality. It's an existing higher dimensional reality. So those are the two very important things: the crumbling, number one, and then the retuning to the higher dimensional reality. That's also taking place right now.
Such a beautiful thing. And I'm so thrilled to see so many of us out there getting glimpses of this and watching it happen and helping to manifest it by, holding our hearts open and focusing on how we would like life to be. Kerry, this has been fascinating. I had one more question for you, but I'm not even going to ask it because I'm going to ask a different question. I want you to, if you wouldn't mind, maybe come back for another show in a little while. I caught, so don't answer it, but I'd like to maybe ask you about this. You were talking about getting permission to share some new news and new contacts and things like that. And I know it's new for you. Would you be interested in coming back when some of that kind of shakes out and you'd be ready to share more of it with the public? I would love to do this again with you.
Yeah, I sure would. The new information that's coming out, when I come back, I'll tell you more about what it is and what I can share of it. I will just tell you that it's from the Galactic Federation, who I've been working with very closely, and they are on the brink of revealing a lot for humanity that ultimately frees us, that ultimately liberates us. And it's going to be for those who are ready to hear it, as everything is. Everything comes to us, and it's only when we're ready. We can sometimes hear the same thing 10 times, but one day we're ready, and then we go, oh my gosh, did you know that? And I'm sure we've all got friends like this, right, who go, this amazing thing happened to me today, and then you'll go, but I told you about this so many times. But that's okay. We all hear things when we're ready to. So the Galactics are waiting for that. They're waiting for enough of humanity to be ready for higher level information, new information that is all to do with the new realities in front of them and how to step into them. Yeah.
So exciting. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Tell everyone who's listening how they can find you and a little bit about what you offer.
Sure. Well, kerryk.net. It's that easy. kerryk.net is my website. There's a contact page on my website, so feel free to click on the contact page. You can send me an email. I do one-on-one sessions, but a disclaimer is that you will waste a very long time for a one-on-one session. So don't wait. Be impatient like I am, because I think that patience is a virtue, but I also think impatience is a good virtue too, because it propels us forward. And I have great respect for the impatient ones. You can book a private session, but rather look at the upcoming courses that are taking place. I think a person gets a lot more out of the courses. I'm currently doing an 8-week course. We're about halfway through that one, and there's another one coming up in September, which is all about the pineal gland, which is really my great love, to work with people in activating their own heart consciousness in alignment with the pineal consciousness, to actually create a sacred union inside the body. And that's coming up in September. That course is called Higher Heart, Higher Mind. And you go to my website, click on shop, and there you'll find it, September, Higher Heart, Higher Mind. And also, you know, if you don't feel like waiting until September, or if you're watching this on replay and September's already passed, there are at least 20 or 30 different already existing pre-recorded sessions. Some of them are an hour long, some of them are 10 hours long. But you can go and have a look at whatever becomes luminous on your screen. Don't read the titles with your eyes. Look at what becomes luminous on your screen, and go ahead and trust your gut. There's something for everybody there.
Beautiful. Kerry, you know, I woke up and it's such a gorgeous day here in Kansas, and I felt so great, so much better than yesterday. I had sort of some ascension symptoms, but I feel even better now after speaking with you. This has been marvelous. Thank you for connecting. Thank you for introducing yourself to our community. And I really, really look forward to having you back really soon, maybe sometime later this summer, if that works out.
Absolutely. That'll be great.
Okay.
Thank you, Candace.
Well, thanks everyone. And remember, you can find a quantum healer near you going to quantumhealers.com. Thank you, everyone. And don't forget to hit subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can see more of this kind of content on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.